Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. If you've been around for a while, you'll know that I am a massive fan of patchwork and using small pieces of fabric to make beautiful designs, and I especially love English paper piecing. And a few weeks ago, I uploaded a video about English paper pieced hexagons and showed you some different basting techniques and how to put those together. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it in a card at the top of the screen there so that you can go back and watch it. I thought for our patchwork adventure this week, we would look at another type of English paper piecing, and that is the Dresden plate. Now, I am a massive fan of the Dresden plate. I think they look beautiful, and like hexagons, they are pretty foolproof. So if you've got a needle and thread, a bit of paper, and some scrap fabrics, you are going to get a good result. I'll take you through the process and I'll show you how to do it without a template or pattern. So I've made my own Dresden plate design. It's really straightforward. You can just do it with a basic word processing program on a computer or a tablet, and I'll talk you through the process. And I'm going to go for a rainbow theme this time. So gather some bits and pieces and let's get stitching. So this is the Dresden plate. This is a picture from Patch by Kath Kidston, and this actually is provided with this book as a free project. And I mentioned this book in my last patchwork video, and I think I showed you the cushion that I made. So they provide it either as a tote bag or a cushion. I turned it into a cushion, and Dresden plates are made up of these kind of Trivial Pursuit wedges. You can make them pointy or rounded. I really love the rounded version, and they have often got Suffolk puffs at the centre just to cover over the raw edges that form the point. But this is a pointed version. This is a book called Quilting in No Time. I think this one's still in print, but this one you can see has got more pointed fans on it, and both of these are 12 segment Dresden plates. You can do just any number really, you just have to work out what angle you need. So you take your 360 degrees, divide it by however many fans you want, and that angle is the angle of the triangle that forms the basis of your wedge. You can do flat ends as well if you want to, so there are little templates available that are just the wedge, so you can have straight edges around as well. There's loads of different ways of doing it. This one has got a circle appliqued over the top, so it's not a Suffolk puff. Because it's a placemat, it's just flat, and they put ric-rac around it. And I did actually make a Dresden plate back in 2022 when we did our Winging It book. It was in February and I did it as a live stream. So this is a miniature Dresden plate done in cold colours, and you can see I embellished along the joins with our stitches of the month back then and some beads as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. I am going to make a rainbow Dresden plate. You'll need some little scraps of fabric, you'll need some normal machine cotton and a little sharps needle. That's all you'll need, maybe a few pins, and I find for this project a wonder clip comes in really handy. You only need one actually, so that's pretty much all you're going to need to make this. So let's get going. Okay, so for our patchwork panel this time around, I thought it would be fun to do a Dresden plate. Now, I absolutely love making Dresden plates. They are fairly straightforward, and actually, although there are loads of patterns online, you don't really need a pattern. It is possible to make one yourself. I've done one here. So all I've done is go onto a word processing program. I've used Microsoft Word, and I started out with a square that is the size of my panel. So I'm going to make a 6-inch panel, and I've worked in centimetres here, but a 15 centimetre square is a really great starting point. So if you just add in a shape into a word processing program and add a 15 centimetre square, and then I've made a circle that fits inside it. So there's maybe a 3 or 4 mil space at either side on all 4 compass points of the circle, and the space between is 30 degrees. So I am doing a 12 segment Dresden plate, and I've basically just put a line across the centre of my circle, copied it and pasted it, and used the rotate function to rotate it 30 degrees. And then I've copied and pasted that and rotated it again until I've got 12 even segments. And then all you need to do to get a rounded edge, because I've chosen to do a rounded edge, is just get a circular shape that you can draw around and sit it in and draw around it, and that will give you your rounded edge on your Dresden plate. And I've cut them out to make my pieces. I've got 12 of these. I have already made some up. I've cut my 12 shapes. I've got my backing fabric here. I've marked out a 6-inch square in the centre, and I've left a good 1/2 inch overlap on each side, and that will give me some space to trim it and to join this together if I want to join this to another block. So whatever size square you want, you need to just make sure you've got a bit of border. I'm just going to move this to one side so that I can show you what to do. I'm going to make a rainbow Dresden plate, and I have already made some of the pieces already, and I'll show you that in a second, but I just wanted to show you how to make the pieces. So I've just got some patchwork fabric here. This is a little pack that I got, rainbow colours, and I think it's going to work a treat. So I've got decided to glue base this, and I've got my fabric glue here, which is working really well. And what I'm going to do to start is just pop a bit of glue on the back of my piece, and I'm going to lay it onto my fabric so that there's a border on all sides. So I'll do this a couple of times, and then I'm going to just trim around that, leaving a border on each of the edges. You don't have to be mega precise with this. Just like all English paper piecing, it sort of always comes right, so don't worry too much about it. Just going to put a bit of glue around that curve. That's where I'm going to start, and I'm just going to pleat the fabric around that curve so it's attaching onto the glue, and I always forget that last little bit. Then I'm going to go down the sides, so I'll do this side first, and I want to fold it back to the paper, so a nice tight crease there, and on the other side as well. And you will end up with this overhang. It's no big deal. You can just trim it off if you want to, so I'll trim this one off just to show you. You can also blunt the end, that's fine as well. So let me show you that again. I've got a bit of purple here, got my paper piece, and I'm just going to stick it down onto the fabric. Have a think about what fabric you're using, because you might want to position your, better cut it out first, you might want to position your little wedges in a particular way to catch a specific part of the pattern, but I've got fairly easy to use fabrics here, so I've mostly used geometrics. I've got some spots, I've got a few stripes, a couple of florals and some checkers as well, like ginghamy fabrics, so they're working quite well. And I've selected some fabrics that follow a rainbow, so just going round in a circle with a sort of almost like a colour wheel. So just trim that off if you want to, but you don't have to. Just got some dark blue here. So all I did was print out my circle, my divided up circle, and cut out the pieces from that. And it's working really well. And that way you can make any size of Dresden plate you like. So you can make these really big. You can do 16. I think the bigger the Dresden plate you make, the more wedges you can get away with. It's hard to do loads of wedges on a Dresden plate of this size. I've stuck with 12. I'm not going to cut the tip off this one, just so that you can see that it works perfectly well, even if you don't. This is where I'm up to so far. You can see that I have cut out my little wedges and I've stitched them all together, and doing that is actually really straightforward. So I can show you on this one here. What I'm going to do is match up the curve, and I'm doing that because these points aren't really going to be visible, so the curves are, and I want to match those up, and I'm just going to clip them together with a wonder clip. I need to make sure I keep in mind which way round these are going to go. So if I stitch down the right hand side, when I open it out, the pink will be on the left and the purple will be on the right. I want it the other way around, so I want my purple to come next. Whichever one you want on the right, if you're stitching the right hand seam, whichever one you want on the right needs to be on the top, and that way they'll open out correctly. So I've just got some normal machine cotton, and I'm going to take my needle through the bottom of that curve. So I'm going to start at the top of my shape, and I just want to catch the fold in the fabric. I don't want to catch the paper, just catching the tiniest little bit there, and then I'm going to move along a little bit and go back in again. So this is a whip stitch. I'm always going in the same direction, and I want my stitches to be about 1/16 of an inch apart. So we're just making tiny stitches that just catch the very edge of our fabric. So you don't have to go right the way down to the very tip, that's fine. And when you're there, you can knot it off if you want to at the bottom. I'm not going to worry too much about it. So this is going to sit in here, and I'm going to put my pink on top of my red because that's the way round that's going to go. Put my little wonder clip, and don't need to finish off my thread because it's where I need it to be. Just going to slide through to the other side of the point and just come out at the point there. Just make sure I haven't got any thread looped anywhere that I don't want it. And then we're going to stitch up the next side. And then I'll stitch the purple to my dark blue, and that will complete my circle. Now you might be able to see that some of these wedges are a little bit floppier than others. That's because I've taken the papers out. Some people like the rigidity of it with the papers in. I prefer to take the papers out kind of as I go along. I also don't like having all of that to do at the end. Makes me feel like I'm making progress to take them out as I'm going, but it's totally a preference thing. But I will show you how to do that in a second. So when I'm back up to the top, I'm just going to put another stitch across, and then I'm going to tie off my thread like that. And when I open it out, that gives me my pink. Now if you leave your tabs on at the bottom, just want to make sure you're nesting them together. So when I stitch these two sides together, I just want to make sure that tab is going underneath the purple, so it's not going to stick out on the front. So I'm now going to fold these two together, the blue and the purple, clip them with a wonder clip, and I'm just going to sew up that last remaining edge. Okay, so here is my Dresden plate so far. It's a little bit lumpy in the middle. We'll sort that out. You can see that these are kind of butting up together, and now it's safe to snip that off, that little tag. And what we want to do before we take the remaining papers out is just press the Dresden plate. You can see the ones that I've taken out, the crease is nice and sharp. That's because I pressed them before I took the paper out, and just pressing at the centre is going to help that sit nice and flat. So to take the papers out, it's really straightforward. I've just got a chunky needle here, and I'm just going to slide that needle underneath where the glue was. Because we've been quite light with the glue, we only needed it to hold the shape while we were just putting the panels together. Just gonna slide my needle under there, and then I'm lifting that paper out, and anywhere where you've caught it with the stitching, you just can, you've effectively perforated the paper, so they come off quite easily. Just anywhere where you've got a thicker chunk of glue, you might find it needs a little bit of help. You can do this in any of the three basting ways or tacking. So English paper piecing, I did a video on hexes a few weeks ago, and I showed 3 different ways of tacking or using the paper formers. One was glue, and then there's one way you can tack by stitching through the paper and the fabric together, or there's a way of making long stitches across the back to hold everything in place, and you can do any of those methods on this. So those methods apply to all English paper piecing, doesn't matter what shape you're using, it's whichever method suits you. So for this one, thought we could do the glue because it's a lot quicker. So I'm just going to take the rest of the papers out. You can see they come out fairly easily once you've worked your needle underneath and just loosened up that glue. They do come out fairly easily and without much damage, so you can see. Could probably get one more use out of those papers, but I'm not going to. So I'm just going to take the remaining papers out and then we'll come back. So here's the Dresden plate all stitched together. I've taken all the papers out and you can see those creases that are pressed in are holding the fabric's splaying out a little bit, but the creases are there as a guide. And so I just want to line up my design, my Dresden plate, centrally on my backing fabric. So I'm going to focus on north, south, east and west as a starting point, just to make sure I'm positioning things correctly. I'm just going to pop a little pin when I'm happy that I've got my position right. Once I've got north, south, east and west in, I can then start stitching it down. So this needs a backing piece, really. You can just make a Dresden plate shape, like this would be great as placemats or table mats, but I'm doing this as a quilt block, so this is going to work fine. Just going to start at the top here, because we're just going to applique this onto our backing fabric now. So I've come up through both layers of the fabric. I'm going down just through the backing fabric and I've come along a little bit and come up through both layers again. So down through just the backing fabric, tuck your needle right into the edge of your Dresden plate, slide along and come up through both layers. So just a normal applique stitch is all this needs. And I'm going to work my way right the way around the outside. So once I've got round to my pink wedge, I'm just going to flatten it out, make sure the edges are turned under, and then I'll put a pin in it to make sure it doesn't move while I'm stitching. Just working our way around. Like that. Just make sure you put a stitch in at those joins, just to make sure everything's nice and secure. So I'm just folding under the edges of the pink along that crease line, making sure it's lying flat, and then I can pop my pin in. You can do them all before you start stitching, but I'm fairly impatient and I also want to smooth things out as I'm going, just to make sure I'm not stitching in lots of lumps and bumps. So I prefer to do it a bit at a time and just smooth out my Dresden plate as I'm going, so I'm not creating lots of bagginess. I'm going to stitch all the way around and then we'll come back and deal with that centre. So here we've got our Dresden plate. I've pressed it again so it's nice and smooth on my backing fabric. And so what we've got now is this bit in the centre where all the points join up. Now you can just neaten up those edges by stitching around and taking a needle and just making sure that everything is nested really nicely. So that orange one would need to go underneath. They would all need to go in like that. So you can do it like that. You could put a button on it, something like that. I think that would be really cute. So good sized button would be really nice. I'm going to make a Suffolk puff and I've got this square of yellow gingham. It's different to any other colour that I've got on there and I haven't got a lot of yellow. It's kind of this egg yolk yellow and wanted a bit of yellow to brighten it up. What you need to think about is what size of Suffolk puff you want. Whatever size circle you draw, your Suffolk puff is going to be about half that size, and I think probably a 3 centimetre circle will be too small. 3.5 is going to work. So what I want is a 7 centimetre circle, and the biggest circle on my circle template is 7 centimetres, and so I'm just going to draw around it and we'll go with that one. So we're going to cut out our circle. It doesn't have to be precise particularly, it doesn't have to be exact. And I've threaded up my needle with just some machine cotton. What we want to do is turn over about 1/2 centimetre, 5 mils, 1/4 of an inch of fabric, and we're going to just gather. I've just knotted the end of my thread. I'm just going to gather this around, and we do that by stitching around with running stitch. So I turn and then load up onto my needle, turn over the edge and load up onto the needle. These are so easy. You might know them as yo-yos. I think across the pond they are known as yo-yos. I know them as Suffolk puffs. They look so cute at the centre of a Dresden plate. Right, so when we get back to the beginning, we need to make sure we don't finish off our thread, and I'm just going to pull on that thread, and what happens is that the fabric gathers up and then starts turning in on itself, and that creates something like a tiny shower cap, like that. So we want to pull it in as close as we can, so make it as tight as you possibly can. Try not to, don't break your thread, otherwise you have to start again. And when I'm happy with that gathering, I'm just going to put a quilter's knot in the centre just to secure that, and you can just adjust it, make sure it's sitting flat like that. And then without finishing off my thread, what I'm going to do is just slide my needle through that hole at the centre, and I'm going to bring it out at the fold at the edge. Just want to avoid catching any fabric inside, like that. Then I'm going to position it centrally on my panel. If you want to, you can pop your needle through the centre and just make sure it's lined up centrally on your Dresden plate. And then we're just going to applique stitch this on. The benefit of adding the Suffolk puff to the centre is that without it, this is all loose. We've only just stitched it around the outside edge, so all of this is loose and baggy, and the Suffolk puff adds a layer of stitching inside the Dresden plate to help hold it down. So when we've gone all the way through, just flip it over and secure the thread on the back. Now, while I've got this turned over to the back, let me just show you that this is still quite baggy here. We've only joined our Dresden plate around the edge and at the centre. So you can either stitch in the ditch, where you're just going to take some running stitches along the seams between the wedges, or you could stitch just inside each wedge and do maybe a line of running stitches just inside each shape, just to hold that in place. How you quilt it will depend on what you're going to do with this panel. So I'm going to leave it for now because I am going to make many quilt blocks and put them together, and haven't yet decided how it would be quilted. So I'm just going to leave it there for today. That's our Dresden plate. I hope you've enjoyed that. Really simple actually to get a fairly spectacular design, and we've put our little Suffolk puff or yo-yo at the centre. Thanks so much for watching today. If you want to watch another patchwork video, I will link one up here, and down here I'll put something else to inspire you to get creative today. Have a ton of fun making your Dresden plate, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!